and also to give money to help us support the changes we need to make downstairs to help us ensure that we can get this. So it's I don't know, maybe it's risky, but I think we can pull it off.
I think it's a good risk. I'm just, someone pulled me aside afterwards and said, so what happens if you guys don't get it? And not that
I've heard different numbers.
I have 100% confidence in you.
No, but that was the way it was the last time with the last Blue Cross Blue Shield contract. We were the first ones to get PCMH certification.
Right.
We're always a little bit competitive with internal medicine. The other one was diabetes. But I think strategically you have to decide when you accept something like this, it's these things that you're going to do anyway. And looking at the PCMH, my read of the requirements is they feel like good things
I agree,
to figure out how to do. And if you're the first one to do it, you can get some resources. Beat, and then Martha, and then Stu.
And it's really interesting to hear you say that we're ahead of the pack in so many places. And I think this is the problem with medical students. What they need to see right now is those people who are ahead of the pack. And there's just way too many people in our state practicing family medicine who are way behind. Yeah. And so we have this really, really hard situation right now where we don't have enough capacity to show the amazing things we do in the few residencies that do it. So it's family medicine, and probably a couple places in Cabarrus. But somehow we need to jam the medical students into those places. And I think that's the huge challenge, just the capacity and to figure out creative ways so all students can see these amazing things we're doing here.
And I think that's going to need a change in our model, whereas previously we wanted only to be in practice. We now need to be have used discretion about which practices we put medical students
An
in.
incredible discretion. It's just a few leaders that are really doing what we're going to do in the future.
Yeah. Martha?
I guess, I understand, and it's really helpful to have visited a bunch of programs, be able to compare ourselves and see where we are. But my naive hope would be that we could be like the leaders in collaboration and taking all of these folks forward instead of feeling like we're competing against them. Because clearly everybody wants better family doctors.
So that's why we've done the IPIP, and that's 900 practices, and why we've led the residency collaborative with 25 practices, including internal medicine and pediatrics. It's because we want to make that change. I agree with you completely. And that's actually our role and responsibility.
I mean, maybe that happens at the board level as opposed to our department. I think it's just a good
No, that's our department has led the I3 collaborative from the beginning, as Sam and Alfred now. And that's 25 residencies. It's the biggest one in the country. So it's still a small piece. There's a lot to do. So
I think just to tag onto that for a second, and then one other point, which is, it's really good to look at those programs that are successful, and what can we incorporate? I mean, what can we learn from them? It's not just can we be the best, but they're doing some things that we could probably adapt to our program or incorporate or improve on. And that's the issue I'm just thinking about, how do you expand, so if we were to triple the residency, that's 30 residents, and that's just huge. So just on all levels of that, how do we have a facility in which 30 residents can practice? And then we can't do it just with the people sitting in this room. How do we expand faculty? And that's an important thing to look at other programs and assess also. Does it happen here? Is it through outlying centers? Probably yes. And how do we train?
I can get us up to 16 or 18 a year very easily through Wake and Chatham Hospital. Mm-hmm. But to get into this range, I think Canada is probably the right example. No, no, not necessarily. University of Toronto in Canada runs a network of residencies within Toronto, and they're 2-year residencies, and that's how you get to 20 or 30 within one place. It's a radically decentralized model, and some of the shifts that the residency has made in the last couple of years of having, or last 5 years, having the didactics back in one day where people come out to is one of the things that you need to do to be able to do that.
Charlotte's doing something like that, right? Where they have residents in different places and then they use teleconferencing for their educational pieces.
Yeah, and you have to decide whether you like teleconferencing. Yeah. And I think there's all these people in the world that I live in is, all right, let's figure out what the value is of teleconferences. If it's a lecture being transmitted, you're losing the personal interactions and other things. And how do you do that? But we got to figure out how to do that.
I think it's excellent that, you know, we are focusing on strengthening the department and really kind of building up a wonderful infrastructure from continuing the momentum for changing the scope of practice and making sure that you're a leader for people to follow. But in the back of my mind, I kind of have this feeling, kind of like a field of dreams, you know, build it and they will come. How do we emphasize what we're doing to the general public and how to encourage them to use the wonderful things that we are building? Like, how do we even begin to do that?
How do you take, in the broadest thing, how do you take people and say, you're going to be hospitalized less frequently,
Yeah.
you're going to have many fewer ED visits, and that's going to be better.
Yeah, how do we
No.
begin to
Part of it is what Christy is doing. You know, this is they used to use the term propaganda in a positive way. You know, about the turn of the last century. But you know, we have a population that loves technology, tends to until they experience it, tend to depreciate personal connections. So how do we make that case in a PR fashion? So we're looking for young researchers to help us with that.
Tossing it back at you.
Any other things? Good. All right. Thank you all. You rubbing your hair, or you?
I just want to emphasize a point that you've made, which is I think that we really need to look at how we're going to relate to the TPN practices, because as I think about expansion of our educational programs, we need to make sure that we've got faculty that are out in those practices. And with the recent change in TPN, where they have lost their appointments, or at least the change in status.
The strategic issue we have here is that we've been boxed in to the Family Medicine Center. Now we're going around it with all these population, but we had close relationships with Highgate and with Seiler, and maybe other practices as well. And strategically, we got to get outside of that box.
And we have to figure out ways to do that to really involve them in the department, not just in the teaching capacity, but in other aspects of the
Well,
department.
you know, PHS is sitting there in plumb, and our missions are aligned. And that's the obvious way to do it.
So our internal operations guy is up to Hill on inpatient service. So speaking of wondering his part, how do we take this as a vision and a broad statement? How are we going to implement this? What does this mean for us for this year?
Well, I think each one of the programs has, I mean, and this is basically concatenating what each one of the programs has put in. And this is where, after listening to what each of the programs want to do, this is my way of saying back, and Tim's way of saying back, that this is where we think are important to go. So we will work with each of the, and for the most part, we've basically included what people want to do, and have said they want to do in this. Chrissy, you've got your session. I'm sorry to go over for you.
Okay, it's an important conversation.
All right.
We are going to have our education collaborative now. People need to stretch. Please, 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 if you can stick around and pitch in to this important work, I would really appreciate it.